the US, along with Israeli forces, was able to take out the Iranian Supreme Leader, Khamenei. So, what is your first reaction to that?
Well, it's pretty momentous. It's momentous not just in the sense of this confrontation, which has really come to an impasse over the Iranian nuclear program, its ballistic missile and drone program, and its support for terrorist proxies. It's momentous for the broader Middle East because Ali Khamenei, as the supreme leader of Iran, has been conducting a very aggressive, destabilizing foreign policy in the entire region around him for 3 decades, has been intervening in conflicts or exacerbating or even creating conflicts in his neighboring states since the 1990s, and it's been really debilitating. So I think the entire region is, of course, apprehensive about what will come next, but they have to be breathing a sigh of relief that this man and his entourage, which had done so much damage in the surrounding Arab world in particular, is gone.
Right. Now, my next question to you is, now that Khamenei has been taken out, what does the US want to do in Iran now? Is the US looking to withdraw its troops? Is the US looking to, cease all hostilities? Is the US looking to come back to the negotiating table? What is it that the US government now wants now that, one could say that a regime change in Iran is in order?
Well, listen, as a first answer to that, I think with the disappearance of Khamenei and his immediate entourage, it's already a regime change in a sense, because this has been a personalized Khamenei regime for more than 20 years of his tenure. He's consolidated a huge amount of power in his hands. So whatever comes in his wake, even if it's the remnants of that regime, it's going to be a different regime, and it's going to have to make different choices, or it's going to suffer the same fate. I think what the U.S. is probably looking for is you go back to the original objectives that President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio stated. First was full elimination, dismantling of the Iranian nuclear program, the dismantling of Iran's ballistic missile program, its threatening drone program, and lastly, the end of Iranian state sponsorship of its terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East in particular. That's Lebanese Hezbollah, Hamas, or the remnants of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, the Iraqi Shia militant groups. There needs to be a cessation of these. I think the United States is going to continue the military pressure until there's either the end of Iranian physical capabilities along all three of those lines, or there's a full capitulation by whatever remains of the Iranian regime on those three issues.
Right. Now, when the US speaks of a regime change in Iran, is there a different stakeholder, or is there a different leader, or is there a different regime that the US particularly supports? Say, for example, currently, the son of the last Shah from the previous monarchy in Iran, Reza Pahlavi, he has been speaking. He has been speaking about how the Islamic regime is now dead. So, does the US support him?
Well, so far the U.S. administration has not commented on. They haven't indicated that they favor one group or one figure over another. I think they do want to see change. They want to see change in the nature of the regime in Iran. They want to see a change in its policies and its behavior, but they haven't thrown their support behind any one faction or group or another.
Right. Now, another question is, Iran continues to retaliate. It continues to strike Israel. It continues to strike ships that are supposed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. It continues to strike other countries in the Gulf, including Abu Dhabi, other cities, other countries, including Abu Dhabi, including Dubai, including Oman. Not Oman particularly, but including Bahrain. So there are so many countries that are being struck by Iran as we speak. How does the US plan on responding to that?
Well, I think probably, first of all, the Iranian regime is attempting to attack those countries. They are sending massive numbers of missiles and drones to attack those countries. The vast majority of those are being intercepted. I think you're seeing the defenses are actually shooting down, intercepting the vast majority of those before they can do any damage. I think that the U.S. Targeting plan, the campaign plan from both the U.S. and Israel, is to get to the point where the Iranians really don't have enough launchers left for those missiles to be able to do any damage. That's a point that the Israelis were able to reach during the 12-day war last summer, several days into that confrontation. By the time you got more than 4, 5, 6 days into that clash last summer, the Iranians were really no longer able to launch dense salvos at Israel. They were able just to do the random odd couple of missiles here and there. And those are not a strategic threat. I have a feeling that the U.S. military, now that they're involved in the same kind of operation, is going to be able to get the Iranians to that point even more quickly, where there just aren't enough launchers left. It doesn't matter how many missiles the Iranians have if they don't have the launchers to fire them. And every time they do, every time a launcher is used, it's detectable and can be struck. So there are fewer and fewer launchers every time the Iranians use them. It's a reducing asset. And I don't think it'll take too long before the Iranians just don't have that launch capability anymore. Drones are a different matter. The Iranians have many thousands of those drones, and they're harder to preempt. They can be driven out in the desert and just launched in the middle of nowhere, and it's difficult to preempt that. But then again, they are slower moving, so they're easier to intercept by counter drone systems in the places that they're attacking.
Right. Now, I have two more questions. One of them being, what do you think of the current situation at the Strait of Hormuz? Because, a shipping vehicle from Oman is supposed to be sinking at the moment. It has been struck by Iran. How does the US feel about the situation at that strait, considering that it, controls almost 20% of the world's, oil supply?
I would be really surprised if the Iranian regime were able to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz for very long, maybe a few days at the outside, and that's not something that's going to create a long-term disruption to the global oil market. And that's just simply because the Iranians, I don't think, have the military capacity to do that. The Revolutionary Guards Navy, which is inside the Persian Gulf, is the part of the Iranian regime that has the function of trying to disrupt the strait. That's what happened also back in the tanker war in the late 1980s, which also didn't last very long. I think this time around, the IRGC Navy, a lot of it, I think, has been struck already. I don't think those capabilities will last very long. The bigger threat there to ships is going to be from cruise missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, which are located on shore, but many of those are in fixed sites, and the fixed sites can't move. So once you fire from them, they will be destroyed. And again, there will be attrition very quickly, I think, of that capability. I don't think this is a long-term strategic threat. In addition, I think it's very difficult for the Iranian regime, if it is under massive pressure in Tehran, just to exist, for it to continue to mount a campaign in the Strait of Hormuz. So I don't think this is a longer term worry.
Right. And then my final question would be, if you could answer this ever so candidly, how long can we expect for these hostilities to continue? Since you've already spoken on how, Iran is short on resources now. Sure, they still have their drones, their thousands of drones, but when it comes to launchers, they're short on them. When it comes to other capabilities, they're running short. They also have this entire regime change in the works. How long do you expect these hostilities to last, or how long is the US willing to deal with them? Would be my final question.
Well, I mean, the U.S. seems pretty committed. There are a large number of military assets in that region. The U.S. Central Command yesterday gave out a report saying there had been 0 U.S. military casualties as a result of these operations so far. So I think the cost has been very light to the U.S. and Israeli coalition. There are almost no casualties in Israel either. There's some injuries. So the Iranians' ability to inflict damage has been pretty limited, and the assets that are there are pretty robust. I just don't see how the Iranian regime could mount resistance for very long. We could be talking days. We could be talking a couple or few weeks. I just don't see it extending past that. If somehow they were able to maintain some kind of decentralized military resistance and just sort of refuse to surrender from the center, well, I mean, they would quickly, if it gets to something more extended confrontation, the Iranian regime is going to run out of cash as well at some point and just not be able to pay for itself if it really got down to that, because they're effectively blockaded right now by the U.S. military. And if no one else can move oil out through the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians can't either. And so you could expect their cash flow to be interrupted quite decisively.
Right. Now, okay, I just have one follow-up question, and that is yesterday in a post on Truth Social, when he was announcing that Khamenei has been taken or has now been killed, the US president said that for the next week, the US will continue, monitoring the situation, also their strikes, everything. So does that mean that this week is the timeline, or does that mean that this conflict could go on longer than that, or could perhaps even end before that?
I took that. I don't have any inside information on the president's intention there. I took that to mean that he will continue for probably the full phase of the first week of operations. There's probably a very detailed targeting timeline, operational timeline, that the U.S. Central Command and the Israelis have, and he will see that through. He won't end that prematurely. And then as it gets to its close of that first phase, that he'll assess the situation and decide whether to continue or to take a pause or whatever. I would also expect, given that the Iranian regime was just decapitated yesterday, and so the remnants are going to be scrambling to try to reorganize themselves and be able to communicate and so on. And I have a feeling that there will be some factions or figures, or maybe even the outright leaders themselves of whatever remnants emerge there in the leadership, that will be reaching out probably through back channels to say, okay, listen, what can we do to meet your demands and put an end to this pain? I just have to think that pragmatism is going to settle in there. I've never gone along with the idea that the entire Iranian regime are millenarian, suicidal, wannabe martyrs. I think there are going to be some pragmatic survivors there.
Right. I think with that, I've exhausted my list of questions. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I just think that I would say the Islamic Republic, even before this military clash, was a regime that had come to the end of its natural life, really. It had ceased to function as a state in every way except being able to organize violence against its own population. It no longer could keep the lights on. It no longer even could provide water. It no longer could provide any essential services, and its legitimacy was all the way gone. Can't defend itself from outside threats, as we're seeing right now. So that's a regime that really has run its course. Something else is going to emerge in Iran, even if there is some interim phase of a transitional remnants of the existing regime to try to organize that. Iran is opening a new chapter here, and it's going to be quite momentous. There are going to be a lot of risks associated with that, but there are going to be some huge opportunities. Can we imagine? Could we have imagined, let's say, just a year ago, the idea that there might be a different Iran that no longer is hostile to the region around it and isn't a sponsor of terrorism in the international sphere? The opportunity there is enormous.